Hey guys, it's Tyler with TCG Rewind. Today I wanted to do a throwback video. I want to go back to one of the early videos I did on my channel, which is ranking all the decks in the September 2011 format, so the Tengu Plant format. If you ask me, this is the most diverse format Yu-Gi-Oh has ever seen, and there are an absurd amount of very powerful decks that you can play, and you know, it really just comes down to your skill as a player more so than anything else. So yeah, just wanted to go over it, wanted to talk about it. But yeah, let's kind of just jump right into it. Before I hop in and rate all these decks in this tier list, I really want to take a moment to just ask you guys to please subscribe. I'm currently one of the largest Tengu Plant content creators, and that's saying a lot because I'm still a very small YouTuber. I'd like to try to grow this format and, you know, show the people how just great this format really is and how diverse it is. And you know, you guys supporting me and subscribing definitely helps me do that. You might think you're subscribed, but maybe you're not, so just double check just to be sure. But other than that, guys, thanks so much for watching. Let's hop into this video. First off, let's talk about my criteria. So I kind of adjusted how I was ranking the decks from the last time. So the first one is tier 1 high end. I don't think there's any tier 0 decks. I don't think there's any deck that is just so broken nothing can beat it. But this is going to be like the very reliable decks. Like, you can take this into a tournament and probably expect to do well with it, right? Tier 1 low end, that is going to be decks that I think also can win a tournament. So like both of these are under the criteria of, hey, can it win a tournament? The answer is usually yes, right? But it might be a bit more challenging for this deck to win, right? But I think it still has easy potential to make it into the top cut of a tournament, right? Tier 1.5 is kind of challenging, right? Like it's got some problems, and those problems might be a bit too difficult to ignore, so they might not make it. Tier 2 is like, you know, pretty troll, probably not going to get too far. And then gross is if I think it's bad. We won't have a lot of decks in gross, but yeah, let's go to the tier 1, or let's just kind of get into it. So we're starting off with Naturia, and Naturia is an easy tier 2 slam. I tried to make this deck better by adding the plant engine to it, you know, and making it like half synchro plant, half Naturia. But it still just has so many faults, and it's still pretty gimmicky, so I don't think it's really better than tier 2. Same thing goes for Morphtronics. This deck just isn't that good, you know. I mean, it's kind of the issue is, honestly, this deck could be good in all reality. Like it uses machine duplication very nicely, and that's kind of cool. The issue is it's like you pretty much are hard locked into just running Morphtronic monsters, and because you're hard locked into just running Morphtronic monsters, like you just don't have a lot of room for other things. In all honesty, this archetype could be okay if there was more room for back row and stuff like that, but it just doesn't really seem like that's the case. So yeah. All right, next up we have Relinquished. I mean, this deck's kind of like Piper Chaos, right? Like there's some functionality for it. I don't think people have really messed with this deck, but with Djinn turning off special summons, I was running this with Kaiser's Coliseum, because if your opponent can't just swing over it, they can't really summon anything else. Like if they can't put more than one monster on the field, they can't like swing over it once and then swing again. So like you kind of put them in this hard lock where they can't really summon monsters, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how good it is. I think it's pretty fair to just put it tier 1.5. I think it has potential because Piper Chaos is always kind of like a threatening thing, but I don't think it's crazy good. We have Ancient Gear. I'm actually going to move this one up to tier 1.5. I think Ancient Gear Beast is really, really strong in this format, and honestly, I was thinking if you just maybe like modernize the build a bit and just cut Ancient Gear Golem as a whole, like don't do that Future Fusion package and just focus this more on like a control deck, maybe even a little bit of like a Malefic in there. I think it actually can be very powerful. So yeah, I do kind of like it with the Machina engine, and you know, like I said, Ancient Gear Beast just being able to attack over Tengu and just out it, I think is like one of the best features of it. Falcon Punch. So this deck is a new deck that we're adding into the tier list this time. This deck actually won Tengu Mania 2 and top 8'd Tengu Mania 3. This is going to be probably the first one I put in tier 1 low end. Maybe some people will disagree with this, but I think the issue that Falcon Punch has is, I think it had a lot of success in the first Tengu Mania. It saw play because of the fact that no one had seen it before and no one knew how to play against it. But I do think the strategy itself kind of requires that lack of knowledge and lack of like idea of how to play against it for it to be successful. And decks that kind of catch on to how to beat it is, you know, like it just kind of makes it go down. I think there was like representation of that from like Tengu Mania 2, it won. Tengu Mania 3, we had 2 people playing it, like both Himne and Darksigner, who were the creators, and you know, Himne won Tengu Mania 2 with it the first time, but then he didn't even make top 8 in the second one. And I think that's just like an indication that, you know, people caught on to how to play against this deck, so it just kind of went down in viability as a whole, right? Chaos, I always think Chaos is very strong. It just does so much, right? Like, and I feel like whenever I play against Chaos, it's one of those decks that I'm always kind of fearing, because like Chaos Orc or BLS at any given point is just really scary. And then especially if you're like running Warning to out it, if they have multiple lights and darks engrave, you just feel like you just feel a lot of pressure when playing against this deck. And so I always find it to be a big threat and very powerful. And there's so many different ways to approach building it. So I just will always think that this is like a safe bet if you want to take it into a tournament. Next up is Tengu Plants. So Tengu Plants, I don't think this is necessarily just the best deck of the format, right? In fact, my experience of playing Tengu Plants in this format is sometimes you play it and you feel unbeatable. Like, you feel actually insanely broken. Other times you play the deck and it just feels like the worst deck you've ever played. I'm not even gonna lie. It's really weird. Like, it can just brick or just, you know, doesn't have a lot of things it can do. It can get walled off by a lot of things. So it's a really tough deck to place, but I do think that it's like, you know, it's still up there, right? Like, it won Tengu Mania 3, still is a very powerful deck in the format. So history is still speaking for itself, but it's, you know, it's up there. It's good. Salvo Chaos, there's just no reason to play this over regular Chaos. And also, at the end of the day, like, Black Salvo just isn't that good, right? Like, you can synchro for a 7, but what 7 are you making? There's really no like good 7s. So I don't know, maybe there's a way to properly use this, but for right now I just think that it's like not that good. We have Blackwing. Now Blackwing is going to be, it's a bit tricky to place because this deck has actually seen some success in tournaments, like and it can be good. It's just so nerfed, but I just haven't seen enough of it to know that, like, hey, this is good. And my experience playing it has been like kind of hit or miss, where I'm like, I feel like sometimes it's like really good, other times it's like pretty bad. It can be threatening, but I think it also can be easily played around. So for now, I think it's safe to put it at a kind of maybe a higher end tier 1.5. I think someone could easily get a good build for this and bump it up though to like probably low end tier 1 at the highest. Like, I think that would be the peak that this deck could reach if someone found like a really solid build for it. Value Turbo, on the other hand, it's kind of untested, as in like there hasn't been a lot of representation for this, but anytime I've played this deck it feels insane. Like, I think I'd put it on a low end tier 1. Just the fact that every card in your graveyard becomes a resource for like a Chaos package or value just means you can make crazy extensions in a turn. And yeah, it's really just kind of difficult to interrupt. I just feel like you always have something to do, and it's really threatening. So I really like this deck. I would like to see more people play it because I do think it's very, very powerful. But yeah, I think it's fair to put it tier 1 low end. Again, without like hard tournament data, you're not going to be able to like know how good it is. But you know, tournament data isn't everything. Like, you know, a deck can be good without, you know, if people aren't playing it, that doesn't mean the deck is bad, right? So yeah, that's just where I would speculate it to be. So this is Cloudian Synchro. And it's basically just Tengu Plants, so you can't really rate it all that low. It just takes a different approach to Tengu Plants. And in some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse. I do think it's a cool deck, so I'm going to put it up here. But yeah, I don't think it's bad enough to be tier 2, but I don't think it's good enough to be anything above here. This is perfect place for it. So Crystal Beast, it's pretty bad if I'm being honest. Like, I've tried to make this deck work, and maybe there's a build for it. I've seen someone do something where they did like this like Mist Valley combo with it, where you could set up like 3 Ancient Fairy Dragons turn 1, and that's kind of cool, but then it's just 3 Ancient Fairy Dragons, so who cares, you know? Like, it just doesn't do all that much, and it's like pretty interruptible. So I don't know. I'd like to see it do better. Maybe someone can come up with a list for it. I think it has potential just because of cards like Horn of the Phantom Beast and Vanity's Emptiness, since none of the monsters actually go to grave. But, you know, it's still not where, yeah, it just still is way too hard to, like, make it good. Lightsworn, this is what I'm actually going to bump up. It saw success at YCS Dortmund, so it made it into top 4. I believe, and then it won Tengu Rumble. So I think it's fair to actually put this on a high-end tier 1. Like, I think it has the problems of, you know, you're running Lightsworn, so there's some inconsistencies, but if you have a good run with it, the deck can be very powerful. So I think it's fair to move it up. It's shown that it can do well just based on tournament results. I still think it's a bit risky to play, but hey, you know, you can't discredit the fact that, you know, it won a tournament. So Monarchs, yeah, it's done okay in tournament, but it's never done more than okay. And honestly, like, I just don't think, I think it's really easy to play around, and I don't think it's like that good. So I don't know. I can't really ever justify placing it higher than tier 1.5. This is for Flamvel Sworn. I say Flamboil Sworn is probably better than these decks here. But it's still just, it has the same inconsistencies of milling. It's kind of like Lightsworn, right? Where it's like, hey, if you mill, you do good. It can look really good, but it also can look very bad. So yeah, I think it's fair to place at a 1.5. I think this one's a bit harder to pull off than standard Lightsworn or like Twilight Sworn or something like that. Aliens. This is a deck where it's like, hey, Golgar is a really good card, and honestly, it's fun to mess with. I saw someone doing like a hero alien list in this format, and like heroes kind of splashes with everything, but it did look kind of good. So I don't know. I think it is kind of cool, but I don't know if it's better than tier 2. I don't think it's all that great. This would be like zombie control. So this is running like Zombie World, Rivalry, which kind of turns off your opponent's normal summons, as well as using like, you know, Red Eye's Zombie Dragon to try to like steal your opponent's monsters. It's pretty cool, honestly. It's like a fun deck, but I don't think it's really better than tier 2. This is my Volcanic Hero list, and I actually was really thinking about going back and messing with this list again. I just can't shake the fact that Wildfire is a very good card, right? Like, Wildfire is super good, and like, I think maybe this deck just has a harder plant matchup, but I think into other things, it's like pretty fine. So I don't know. I really think this deck is good and has potential. I think it's probably better than like Flamebell Sworn, but I'd still put it tier 1.5, you know. I don't think it's like crazy insane. All right, so now we have, this is Plasma Heroes. Kind of same thing. It's like, it can be really good. Destiny Hero Plasma is a really cool card and really strong. And like being able to just like bring back a Treeborn, normal summon tour guide, get Sangan, summon Plasma, search a card, and you really don't lose much for it. Pretty good. But, you know, it also has its problems. It's kind of cloggy, and, you know, if you get warninged or something on that summon, it can feel really, really bad. So yeah, I don't know. It's okay. Heroes, this deck has seen a lot of play lately. It's very popular, and it's doing pretty well. I think it's very strong. I think I'd probably put it above Chaos. I think this deck is really good, and a lot of people are really pushing it. Some people are even arguing that it's like best deck of the format or up there, and I don't think that's true. I think it's good, and it's good right now, especially because we're just not seeing a lot of TG players in our tournaments. So if you don't have a lot of TG players, Heroes looks a lot better, but Heroes just has such an abysmal TG matchup that it's like, you know, if you see it in there, you're gonna have a bad time. We have, this is Lancer Frogs. I'm going to put it low end. No one's really playing it. No one's messing with it. But I can't just shake the fact that I still think this deck is really powerful, and there's still a lot of potential to it. Like, you could potentially run Obelisk. No one's really messing with Obelisk, but Obelisk is kind of a wicked strong card. And then resolving a Sea Lancer just feels insane, right? Like, if it actually goes off, it's so hard to out. Your opponent needs to see, like, exactly Book of Moon. But you're going to, like, draw a bunch of cards. And so, I don't know. It's like, Valor interrupts it, but if it resolves, it feels pretty game winning, and that's why I think this deck can be good. But I put it low end because it's kind of untested. Let's see, we have Exodia. Now, because Dark World is out of the pool, and Trishula would be the only thing that can really harm this deck. I guess people who side Mind Crush can punish it, but I think Exodia maybe goes up to tier 1.5. Skill Drain in the main deck just deals with Trishula and like Thunder King so nicely. You kind of saw in my Tournament of Tournaments episode, if you watched it, that like I was able to get like 4 pieces in my hand by like turn 2 almost every time, and so it's just like, you know, it's scary how fast you can actually get to Exodia. And then the fact that you're running like triple Dark Bribe, triple Skill Drain, you just have a lot of ways to stop your opponent from turning off what's important at a current time. So it can be kind of bricky, you know. It's tough, but I actually think Exodia got a lot better because Dark World's not there, so you're not really risk getting hit by like turn 1 card destruction for game, right? Like, or even just like drag down. Without those cards seeing a lot of play, this deck goes up in viability, I think. TGs, it's a high-end deck. I think it's getting a lot stronger now because so many people are just bandwagoning like GK and Heroes, and I think this deck is very good against those decks. So same thing goes. This would be like TG stun or even B stun. I think this one's slightly better because I think King Tiger Wangu is just one of the best cards in the format. It's like people like praise Thunder King as being insane, but King Tiger Wangu just walls off like 90% of the top decks. And I just think like, and it's like almost every normal summon in their deck. So I just think it's cracked. So I think any type of like beast stun, I think going away from skill drain is actually a smart play. So like Barbaros as a representation for this deck is a little off because I think a lot of people are stepping away from skill drain because it's just like outside of like for this Exodia strategy, like it just doesn't turn off enough for it to be justified, right? And at the most, I think it would be a side card for a lot of these decks, but like generic spot removal might just be better. But still, I think these decks are very reliable, very good, and like a completely safe call if you want to take it into a tournament. As for Diva Hero, I think it's fair to say this deck is untested, but anytime I've personally played it, it feels insane. I feel like the level of boards you can making like Absolute Zero, Dark Arm Dragon, like Leviair, like you just do crazy stuff with this deck. So I really like it. I think it's really good. But it's kind of hard to justify being higher than that because of the fact that, you know, not a lot of people are playing it. As for Water Synchro, I'm actually going to put this up on high end. I think that like the initial build that like topped the YCS, I don't think that's as good. But I was definitely taking a more Monarch approach to Tengu Plants, where you kind of play Tengu Plants, you cut the traps down, and then you're running like 3 Ryza, 3 Caius. And I tested that build on stream, and it honestly felt really good. So it's kind of like a mixture between Monarchs and Tengu Plants, but it really felt like it had a lot of options and felt really, really punishing and strong against a lot of decks. So I actually think it's really viable. So I'm going to put it on a tier 1 high end just because, again, it has some proof of topping a YCS, but then also just my personal experience, it feels very good. Let's see. We have Rock Stun. And Rock Stun, I'm going to put it up here a little bit higher on the side. On my website, it's built as like a Solidarity build, which honestly, I don't even know if it needs the Solidarity. I think you could just play this as a stun deck, cut the Solidarities down, and just play this like hard focused on stunning out your opponent. And like a set Fossil Dyna is very threatening in this meta. Like so many decks special summon and just can lose to that set Fossil Dyna. So I actually think it's really, really good. Or at least it can be. So yeah, I'm moving this one up a bit, but I do think that it's still tier 1.5 unless someone comes up with a pretty clever build. Gallus FDK, it's a bit gimmicky. It's basically just agents, so it can't ever be bad. And I've definitely been blown out by this. Honestly, I probably put it up here. I think it's slightly more tested than these guys, but at the same time, like running a deck of all monsters is pretty, can be pretty rough. Your opponent like summons a Kaiku or activates Necro Valley and you're gonna have a bad time. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about it, but I do think this deck can be very, very good. If you resolve that combo, you're gonna win, right? So yeah, like I said, I've been blown out by it. Ice Barriers, this might surprise some people. I think before I put it tier 2, I'm moving this up. I almost want to put it higher end on tier 1.5. I think this deck's good. Like, I gotta come out and say, I think it's good. Like, anytime I've tested it, like, I tested it, I just think the ability, like, you summon Lad and you have, like, you know, General Gantala and Grave. You summon Lad, your opponent takes time outing Lad. After they do, you bring back Gantala. Gantala brings back the rest of your Grave. You can, like, just simplify the game state so quickly, and if once you get simplified, if you get one of these Ice Barrier guys to stick, you just start bringing stuff back. And I wasn't experimenting with Dai Sojo, which is the one that says Ice Barrier monsters are unaffected by spells and traps. But like, you can literally turn off your opponent's monster effects to a degree, and you can also turn off your opponent's spells and traps if you get like the full board. And I think that's really good. So yeah, I don't know. I really like this deck. I almost think this could potentially even squeak up into tier 1 if more people experimented with it, but no one really plays it, so it's hard to like make a case for anything higher. But I at least am going to move it up from tier 2. I think this deck is very, very good. Every time I've played it, it just has felt pretty strong. Like I really have, I think I have a very positive win rate on this deck. So yeah, that's just me. Gadgets, this is pure gadgets, so ultimate offering gadgets. I still stand by the fact that I think this deck is very strong. I think it's hard to build because it can be bricky because you have to run 3 of every gadget to get like the full value from ultimate offering. That means you can kind of adjust by maybe, let's say, I don't know, building it with like more cards in deck or something. There's all kinds of approaches you can do, but at the end of the day, I think that, you know, it's still really powerful. Like once you make your first Utopia, right, you can protect your gadgets, and then that just kind of enables you to snowball and make more Exceeds, and I think that's really good. So yeah, I don't know, I like this deck. I'd like to see more people test it because it can definitely win. But I think it's fair to put low end because, again, I think it's a little brickier. Herald, Hyperion, this deck's insane. I think it's high end for sure. I think it's super safe to take to a tournament. The like drawback of kind of being bricky on like ritual cards does suck, but the advantage of being able to like summon out a Hyperion or a Herald with like the Djinn under it just is kind of insane. So yeah, I don't know. I definitely really like this deck. You basically have the same thing as like the FTK, where like if you set up Herald with, you know, turning off your opponent's special summons, it's a win con, but it's more reliable because you get to run back row and stuff like that. So I like it better, but that's just me. Ojama, this deck it's fun, but not good. That's really all there is to say about it. Infernity, this deck saw some success recently, right? It did okay, and I like it a lot. I want to see it do better, but it's really hard to like, it just gets walled by Thunder King, it gets walled by Skill Drain, it gets walled in so many ways that it just feels like really hard to succeed with. So I'd love to see someone prove me wrong and make this deck go into tier 1, but I think tier 1.5 is as high as you can really place it. Karakuri, you may not know this, I'm doing a video on it and that'll be coming soon, but I've been playing Karakuri in a tournament. I always say this deck is insane. People underrate this deck like crazy. I'm undefeated with this deck in the tournament. I cannot stress enough that I think this deck is really powerful and hard underrated. So I would definitely like, the thing is I kind of think about it like this, right? When we approach the Tengu Plant meta, I always say the meta is very fluid, but also when you play in a tournament, like I get to see all the tournament data of all the decks that get played, right? Every time I look at the list and like, you know, maybe we'll consistently see like an Agents or a Tengu Plants make top 8 pretty consistently, right? But then you also check the tournament data and it's like, oh, well, we have 7 or 8 Tengu Plant and Agent players in this tournament, but then you see there's one Karakuri player and they're placing like top 8 or top 4. And like that same approach kind of goes for like X-Sabers and stuff like that, but it's like there's one player playing it and it's still doing well. And so I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, what would happen if we had 6 Karakuri players, right? Like, I'm curious because I really think this deck is very good. And I think that applies to a lot of decks, right? Like, what if we had 6 Nordic players? What if we had 6 X-Saber players? How would that really affect what is topping? Because I actually think that those decks are very, very strong and they just don't see a lot of play. So I'm interested to see how these decks do as the format grows and more people are playing, because each deck really does need more representation to kind of show how strong it really is or isn't, I guess. But yeah, for now, I hard stand by the fact that Karakuri is one of the best decks in this format. I think it's so strong. This is the first and probably the only in the gross tier. I think Chainburn is just bad. Like, I've tried to make it work. I've tried to like get that deck to feel good, but like as you saw in my episode of Tournament of Tournaments versus Joe, you just make a Black Rose or something with a Solemn and you just wipe their board, and they just hard minus and lose. So I don't know. I think it's really hard to make a case for Chainburn being anything but just bad in this format. I think it's so easy to play around compared to others. Malefic, yeah, I gotta say, I'm tempted to even put Malefic in tier 2. I think this deck is just, like, I like the Ancient Gear with, like, running Malefic Cyber End, but I just think Malefic as, like, a deck strategy, I just think it's really poor. I don't think it's very good. Anytime I've played that deck, it just has felt really awful to me, so I'm personally not a fan. I know some people like this deck, I know some people think it's, like, good, but I personally just think it's awful. But, you know, to be fair to the people who do like it, I think it's fair to put it in tier 1.5. Otherwise, personally, I think I would maybe even put it in tier 2. But I think here, low end tier 1.5 is fine. Agents, it's pretty arguably one of the best decks, if not the best deck of the format. I think that people need to be more clever with the builds, though. I think Agents is kind of falling down in strength because people are very set on like the specific builds that have done well in the past, right? Like, not to call out author, but you know, his build is kind of like set the standard for how people approach building Agents. And I think anytime a standard way of playing a deck, like, I guess, becomes a thing, it actually makes that deck worse because people just know what your deck list is. Like, for example, if I play against Agents, I know I'm not running into back row 9 times out of 10. So if I'm not running into back row, I can play a bit more recklessly than I otherwise would. So I think it's really good to kind of mesh this deck with back row, change up the build, because right now I think as far as tournament results have gone, it hasn't done that well. There's actually a lot of agent representation a lot of the time, and then it doesn't really pop off. So yeah, I think people need to change their approach on how to play the deck, but I do still think it's always a reliable, powerful choice. It's easily up there as one of the best decks of the format. Piper Chaos, same thing. I'm always terrified to play against Piper Chaos. I played against some very good Piper Chaos lists, especially recently, and it's really just kind of changed. Like, for a while I was like, maybe Piper Chaos is just bad, but then I've played against really good Piper Chaos lists and I'm like, oh, this deck is scary. So I think it's fair. It's tier 1 high end. I think any chaos strategy is just very good and pretty scary. Honestly, I think I might move this one up a bit. I don't know if it's better than Herald Hyperion though, but honestly, any deck up here is going to be fine, right? Going to be very good for you. This one is the Quick Draw Piper, and I have to put this low end as well. This was the list that Himne won tournament with, and I've tested it, and it feels good in some instances, but it also can feel like really bad. I guess I give it the term empty card advantage. I think there's a lot of circumstances where you have a lot of cards and even maybe a lot of card advantage on your opponent, but the cards don't really do anything, right? Like, you're kind of hard relying on Drill Warrior to cycle through what's actually useful or good for you. And if you don't get the Drill Warrior to stick, you're kind of just sitting there with nothing to do. Like, you actually really need to see the Quick Draw and the Drill Warrior to do something, but you don't actually have a lot, I guess, of reactions to what your opponent does. I don't know. It just feels kind of weird. Like, I really just feel like there's so many cards in there where you're like, hey, I have all these cards in my hand, but I don't really have anything to do. So I think it's like powerful. Definitely a better way to approach like running Quick Draw, but I don't think it's better than like I think it's like low in tier 1, right? This one would be for like Junk Doppel. So this is like if you're running Junk Synchron, playing to that strategy. It's definitely a lot weaker because it gets kind of like destroyed by Maxi. So I don't think it can go better than this. Although honestly, it might be better. People are kind of catching on to the fact that main decking Maxi in this format is just not very good. Like, so, you know, if you can get away with game 1 where it's like better and, you know, avoid it in game 2 or 3, you can maybe win, right? Like, I don't think it's like terrible, but it's definitely not better than tier 1.5. Dragons, we saw Hydro Pump take this to Tengu Mania. I really want to see a good dragon list come through, but he didn't even make top 8 with it, so it's really hard to say that this deck is better than tier 1.5. I still think it's searching for the right build and it hasn't quite got there yet. Zombies. Necro has made top 2 in like every tournament he's played this deck in. So I think it's really hard to make a case that this is less than tier 1. I know he personally says the deck's like tier 3, but I don't know where that bias comes from. I just think that this deck is, I think it's really good. I think I've seen it perform well every time. It looks like it puts up a good fight against the meta. I don't think it's fair to put it any lower than tier 1. Recruiters, this is a weird ass deck. No one's really playing it. Doesn't really matter. It can be kind of cool, like having a lot of creature swaps. You can maybe even play it towards like the Edison Fairy strategy or whatever. Could be good, but for the most part, I don't know. It really doesn't do a lot, and I don't really think a lot of people are playing it right now. This one's for TG agents. I actually think this is better than regular agents. I like it a lot better. But I know more people typically default to the Chaos Agents or like standard agent builds, so I'll put it lower. But I do think that I personally like playing this version better, but it's still very, very powerful, like one of the better ways to play the deck. Nordic kind of falls in with Karakuri. A lot of people hard underrate this deck, and I don't understand why. Like, people say the solution is, let's just not attack very much, right? Or like, you know, avoid attacking so they can't drop the goat. Which is fair, like that's can be a way to deal with it. The issue is if you're not attacking, they're usually sticking their monsters and doing stuff with it. So like, for example, if they summon a Tengu and you just choose not to attack because you don't want them to drop the goat, well, maybe they have the horse in their hand, right? And they can just normal summon the horse, make a level 8, and it's still really powerful, right? There's punishes to not attacking in the same way that there's punishes to attacking. So like, you have to play around it perfectly, and I think this deck is way more threatening than people give it credit for. I think it's very, very strong. Easily a high-end tier 1. I just think, like, again, same thing with this deck, where it's like, if we had 6 Nordic players in the pool, how would it perform? I think it would perform really well. I keep trying to get Dave Trepannier, who topped YCS Toronto with this, to play in some of our tournaments. He's been kind of busy, so he hasn't been able to, but I would love to see him pilot it, because I think he would, you know, make a statement for the deck showing like this deck is really good. Let's see, we have Cloudian. This is just another like troll kind of gimmicky deck. It's fun, but it's not very good. Same thing goes for this like wind-ups. It's like a rank 5 strategy. We kind of saw it in Tournament of Tournaments. It just, you know, kind of falls out pretty hard, so it's not necessarily the best. All right, you know, I'll admit it, I did Skull Servants kind of dirty in the last one. I don't think they're that bad, but they're definitely still tier 2. They're not in gross tier. I think it's fair to say Chainburn is in gross tier, but you know, Skull Servants, it's like a fun for some people, but it's definitely not better than like traditional zombies, so I don't think you could ever put it higher than tier 2. Gladiator Beast, on the other hand, I think it's fair to put it at a low end tier 1. Not enough people really play this deck either. But it did have historical tops in the format, and I do think, you know, with like Horn of the Phantom Beast, Lance, stuff like that, there's got to be builds for it. It can be very strong. So yeah, I'm gonna place it low end tier 1. I do think this deck can be good with more representation. It's definitely better than in other formats for sure too, just because there's less like spot removal and stuff like that like kind of hurt your plays. You're kind of safe to run lower monster counts in this format. Fish are friends, not food. They are a cool deck, a fun deck, but no one plays this deck. I wish more people would, because I mean, honestly, I managed to snag a win with it in Tournament of Tournaments, made it to round 2. I like, if you resolve Super Ancient Deep Sea Coelacanth, it feels really good. It's a lot of fun, but I don't know if it's better than tier 1.5. 6 Samurais, I actually am moving this one up a bit. Joe played it against me in Tournament of Tournaments, and he adjusted the build, and he's actually a big fan of the deck, and he made the deck look a lot stronger than most people I've ever experienced playing against it. Like, I don't know if it's tier 1. I'd like to see how far this deck goes in like Tournament of Tournaments, maybe, for like an indication of maybe this deck is stronger than I give it credit for. But it did manage to be agents, which is kind of crazy. But I do think This deck is a bit better with Joe's build. I really liked how Joe built it. I wanted to kind of experiment with it myself. So it is a bit higher on the tier 1.5 scale, but I still don't think it's like strong enough to be a tier 1. It's still pretty weak. Dark Dragon, this is another one where I'm like, hey, this deck is like pretty strong. Like I actually was experimenting with it a lot, and I was winning quite a few matches on it. I think it's good, but I also think it's really frail. Like, you kind of have to like play as if Valor doesn't exist, and it can get blown out really easily because you minus a lot to kind of go into your combos. If it resolves, you're probably gonna win. If it doesn't, you're probably gonna lose. So I don't know, Valor hurts this deck a lot, but I do think it's really good if used correctly, right? Let's see, Flamvel, it's just right below like, I think it's weaker than Flamvel Sworn. Honestly, I think it's probably even weaker. We'll put like Jurak in the mix because all these decks are kind of one and the same. I think it's weaker than Jurak. Jurak just gives you more versatility with how your rekindling plays can be used, because Velo lets you like reborn something back. So I think Jurak's just kind of do what Flamvel do a bit better. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, these decks are all kind of one and the same, where like they can be really powerful in the right time, at the right time in the right matchup, but I don't think they're really like better than this. Gravekeepers, on the other hand, is very strong. This deck is proving to be one of the best decks of the format. It got second place, and it's like won a recent tournament. It got second place. It's always getting near the top. It's really, really good. I especially like that people are adapting, starting to use like Rite of Spirit. Even Wonder Wand with Rite of Spirit, I think, is really, really good. But yeah, I think like with Dark World gone and there's no punish to a blind turn 1 Royal Tribute anymore, outside of like going against a back row deck that doesn't have a lot of monsters in hand, this deck just especially goes up in viability. It becomes a lot stronger. So this is definitely one of the strongest decks in the format now. It's a hard contender. Spellcasters, I have to put this one up there. I think it's really strong. I mean, you guys, if you watched my recent Tournament of Tournaments episode where I played it, every time I play this deck, I'm like, hey, this always has some weird play to make or does something kind of good. And like this last Tournament of Tournaments episode, like the deck looked insane. So like, I don't know. I honestly think there's a world where this could maybe even go up a tier. Like Secret Village of Spellcasters is kind of a cracked card. Kaiku is really good in the format. I don't know. I really like the deck. I'd like to see more people experiment with it because, yeah, like I said, it's really performed well for me. Speaking of decks that have performed well for me, we have Dragunity. Again, it's really hurt by Maxi, MST, and Valor, and because those are so commonly played, I think it's like fragile, although it has performed really well for me anytime I've ran it. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard to justify going above tier 1.5. It's probably higher end tier 1.5, right? It might be probably the best like tier 1.5 deck in this pool. But yeah, I'm personally a big fan of it. I think it's like strong. I think it's totally acceptable to take this deck to a tournament if you wanted to play, especially if you're a newer player. This is an easy deck to pilot. I think it's super acceptable to take to a tournament. So I wouldn't like let the tier 1.5 like kind of scare you from this. I think it's strong. But I just don't know if it's like tier 1 strong, right? Spaceships, put it like next to recruiters. This deck without Too Honest, like without multiple honest, feels pretty bad. It already wasn't like insane to begin with. So yeah, Moja, I love this deck. It's my baby. It's my creation. It's fun, but I don't know how strong it is. I want to keep tampering with it because I do think it does have some pretty cool like combos and gimmicks that it can do, but I just don't know if it's like, yeah, it's just not better than tier 1.5, at least right now. Fabled, I'm going to move down. I'm actually going to move it down quite a bit. I keep seeing people experiment with this deck. I have even tried to make it good, and every time I play it, I just feel like the deck just sucks. Like, and I feel like it gets worse every time I play it or watch it get played. Like, it just doesn't perform well. It's so hard. Like, and it sucks because the archetype is so cool, but it just has so many weaknesses, man. It's so hard to make work. So, Unicorn is a really cool card and can do really cool plays, but yeah, I don't know. It's definitely on the lower side of tier 1.5. Gate Heroes, on the other hand, we're going to put low end tier 1, and I'm going to put it pretty high up there. I think this list with like the chain material and fusion gate does like crazy things. Like I think it can be absurd, and it's honestly pretty consistent. It's not bad at all. The downside is I think it's like kind of frail with like relying on a field spell. It can get kind of bricky, stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. I think with the right, you know, if you have a decent run with it at a tournament, you can probably win a tournament with it, because it is very strong. We've seen it top before, so I think it's fair to say like, hey, this is low end, but it's very cool and very powerful. The combo to just make every fusion in your deck and like end with like a full board and like Dark Hole's the only out is crazy. Mist Valley, this one goes along with like, it's tier 1.5. It can do a lot. It's pretty good, but like it hasn't really proven to do other like better than that. Divine Wind of the Mist Valley is a very good card and can do cool things, but this deck can also get kind of cloggy and bricky as well. I don't know. There's a world where it could be better than tier 1.5, but it would require the right build. But I do really like the archetype. I think it's a lot of fun. Mist Valley or Gen X Blast Fan or whatever is like a crazy cool card to be able to search Birdman. And yeah, there's definitely potential with it, for sure. There's absolutely potential, but again, I don't think it goes up here. Psychics, maybe people are gonna flame this, but my god, I think this deck is so good. like especially the build I took to the remote duel locals. I struggled against X-Sabers because I think that was like one of my worst matchups, but in reality, I think this deck is really bonkers. Like I feel like it always has something to do. It is so consistent, and I really like the TG build. I don't know. I think my build I ran last time was like very ideal. Like it was very comfortable, and I would always feel comfortable taking this to the tournament, like to a tournament with the intent to win. I would not consider this like a troll pick at a tournament whatsoever. So I really like it. I think it's very powerful. I know a lot of people just do not have the same experience, but I don't know. I don't know what they're doing differently, because every time I play it, it feels cracked. Let's see. Battery Man. This deck is like, it's a tier 2. It can do some cool stuff, but yeah, it's it's still not very good. But it might be higher end tier 2. Like, you know, it runs BLS, it runs tour guides. It got plays to make, you know. Scraps, I'm actually gonna move Scraps down. I'm gonna take it to lower end tier 1. I keep wanting this deck to do well, and I feel a lot of people actually have been playing it. Like people do test it, but it just never is getting the results. Like it doesn't get anything better than average results usually. So I think it's hard to justify higher than tier 1. I have speculated, like I haven't even really tested it or messed with it much, but I think if you played Scraps as like a Beast Stun deck and kind of turned away from using like the Scrap Storm engine and just ran Scrap Beast as a level 4 tuner that like makes Scrap Dragon float, I think that might just be better. Because like I said, King Tiger Wangu is a crazy card, stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. For right now, it just doesn't have the it hasn't really performed well enough. But it did top a YCS historically, so you know there is potential. It can be good. It's just hard to like, I don't know. It's hard to justify. I think especially as people know how to play against it, you like always warning the Scrap Beast over warning the Scrap Dragon, so you don't get, you know what I'm saying? Like people kind of figured it out. So yeah, I don't know. This deck is kind of, it feels kind of sus, but there's still potential to it, right? There's still potential to it. I don't think it's as bad as like tier 1.5, but it is definitely on the low end of tier 1. X-Sabers, this deck's very good. It performed really well, but the weird thing about X-Sabers, I will say this, I'm actually going to move it down a bit, I guess, in terms of viability. X-Sabers and Floater X-Sabers, they're both one and the same, right? I think as people figure out, like, you know, like I did my trap build, and I think that deck was very good. But as people learned what the trap build, or like not the trap build, the decree build, as people learned what the decree build was and how it worked, it became a lot easier to play around, right? So people started adjusting how they played into it, where like that kind of makes, like, I guess we could say the trap build go up in viability, because it was something I talked to Richard about before we played that remote duel tournament. He was experimenting with X-Sabers, and I said that like the issue with running like my identical like decree build is people are so familiar with it now that it kind of goes down in viability. And so he kind of adjusted his build in that remote duel tournament where he like added like bottomless and like Solemn Warning. He like splashed some traps in, just like weird one-of traps that your opponent's not going to expect. And I think that was like a smart call, right? Like you have to adjust the builds. I also will say that in some metas, like if agents and chaos are like absurdly popular, X-Sabers become very weak. But if back row decks, like so for example right now where you're seeing like heroes and Gravekeepers become more popular, and as a result TG might become more popular to combat it, X-Sabers combats all those decks super well, has really good matchups into all those decks. So there's a world where, you know, X-Sabers sometimes can be like the best deck of the format in the right tournament, but then it also can be the worst deck of the format in the wrong tournament, right? So yeah, I don't know, it's really weird. But this is why I talk about Tengu Plant meta being fluid, right? Where like in some, if like based on what's popular at a given time, it can make a certain deck feel like good or bad, right? So X-Sabers is kind of on that spectrum where in certain scenarios it's insane, other scenarios it's like okay, but it by far can still take on agents, it can still deal with chaos, still has the capabilities to win. It's just a bit harder for the deck. So I wouldn't count it out or discredit it as anything less than high-end tier 1. I would still absolutely take this to a tournament and feel completely comfortable doing so. Macrocosmos, I'm going to move it down to tier 1.5. It is kind of bricky. And as Joe kind of pointed out to me in Tournament of Tournaments, this deck does require 2 cards to function. So if you simplify the game state down and you bring down how many decks you are playing, or like bring down like how many cards are in play, this deck can start falling behind really quickly. So if it gets blown out at the right time, you're just going to lose. But it also does have really good matchups into a lot of the meta, which is like pretty graveyard reliant. So like I said, hit or miss, but can be very strong. Arguably could still be tier 1. Like I put it tier 1 last time, but I think it's fair to move it down just because it does have the issue of, hey, it does need 2 cards to function, and if you don't have those 2 cards, you lose. For Machina gadgets, we're gonna put it low end. It did like okay. I think someone was playing at Dortmund and did pretty good with it. But like I just personally think the Machina gadget combination just isn't that good. Like logically, like the idea is, hey, if I have like 2 gadgets in hand, I can pitch one and bring it back, you know, and that's pretty good. But it's like, hey, if I have a bad hand, I can make it kind of less bad. And I don't know if that's like the best approach. I think like more decks focused around the Machina engine itself is probably a better approach, because Machinas themselves are really strong, but like at least Machina Fortress. But you know, gadgets, I don't know if they mix in well with it as they used to. I think that's just like an outdated approach. But I still think, oh wait, it's definitely not high end. My bad. We're putting it low end. Definitely low end tier 1. That it like can be good, but not crazy. I don't know how reliable or good that deck is. I still think like this version is just better, the Ultimate Offering one. Like there's just a bigger payout, but you know, is what it is. Counter fairies. Joe made this deck look insane in Tournament of Tournaments. Made it look kind of absurd. Every time I've tested the deck, I feel like I just get like completely blown out. So it's really hard for me to justify putting it higher than tier 1.5. Like I actually spent a good amount of time trying to make this deck work, and I just felt like it was so hard. So yeah, I think it's like very middle of the pack. It can be insane, like as we've seen, but it also can be really bad. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is a pretty fair placement for it. Volcanics are just like gimmicky. They get a lot of card advantage, but they don't really do anything with it. They can pop cards, simplify the game state maybe, and then maybe win, but they just don't really dish out a lot, which is why, you know, it's just kind of like a fun rogue strategy. Worms would be the last deck on this tier list, and I'm going to put it probably up here on lower end tier 1. I don't think enough people play it. I think resolving Nebula Meteorite is like insane. Like it can just win you a game, but it does come at the cost of like, it is somewhat bricky, right? You do have to run Worm King, which is unfortunate, but I do still think this deck is really strong. I might even put it above like Scraps, right? Like I think you could, I just don't think enough people play it, but I do think it's viable, completely viable. and then it would be low end. So but yeah, I think final thoughts, I think we have about, let's see, about 30 decks in tier 1. As per usual, I still think this is a very diverse format. I think any of these decks are completely viable to take to a tournament and can do very well for you. I think anything on the lower end, honestly, if we were to cut it off at like probably after Infernity, maybe even after Dark Dragon, I think any of these decks could also technically do well. Like, I still really believe in Ice Barriers. There's just not enough people playing it to like prove it. Same thing goes with like Dragunity and stuff like that. Just almost never any representation for the deck, but it can be very good, right? So yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about the decks, how I feel about it all. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. If you agree, disagree with my takes or my choices. You know, I definitely am speaking a lot of this from my own experience rather than just like strict tournament data, because again, the format isn't really big enough to justify like tournament data being like a hard representation, because again, we're just not seeing enough representation of each deck in each tournament, right? Like, maybe you'll see one Karakuri deck or one X-Saber deck in the pool and it like does well, and it's like, hey, that's great, but what does that mean? You know, if you have like 6 decks in, like what Agents or Tengu Plants do, it might show a better indication of how strong these decks actually are. Also, real quick, I felt like it was worth mentioning that if you're interested in giving any of these decks a try, or even seeing some of the tournaments or tournament results, join the Tengu Plant Discord. I'll have a link to it in the description. So if you're new to the format and want a place to play, we have all kinds of tournaments going on in there constantly, some with free entries and cash prizes. So definitely worth checking out. So I'll put a link to that in the description. But yeah, that's my take on it. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully if you're new to the format, want to try anything out, you can go to my website, tcgrewind.com. Pretty much all of these decks, except for like Falcon Punch and the Piper Quick Draw, are on the website. I would like to add those to the website eventually, but yeah, all those decks are there if you want to give them a try. Give it a shot yourself, see how you do. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure you guys have a great time dueling today.